Dee, are we really going to try to talk about viburnums and keep this podcast to a reasonable length of time?
We're going to try. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
So, Dee, we had that long, cold, cool spring.
Yes.
Woke up one day and it's hot.
Same thing happened here.
I was rushing around. I could not keep the tomato and pepper plants. I had put them outside in a sheltered spot on the patio. I could not keep them wet. Finally, one evening, I went out and planted until dark, like the old days when I used to work and was trying to squeeze it in. But so the tomatoes are in the ground, the peppers are in the ground. I wish they had been a little bit bigger, but Yeah. And the violas and the pansies just went, we're done. We're out of here. Hot.
They went straight to seed, right? They just
seed.
Elongated, and then they went,
They're wilted messes. And I pulled most of them because I needed to plant summer annuals in the containers. And they were going nuts down at the greenhouse. And I'm like, I'm going nuts buying stuff. And so anyway, the back containers are planted. The vegetable garden plants are in. I've been to my sister's condo once. We've got some petunias in the ground, a few vincas. I'm going back with some zinnias, some of those shorter zinnias. One day I'll just go over there and plant them. So, and other than accidentally buying 2 peonies, I'm in good shape.
And you need to tell people how you ended up buying these 2 Ito peonies. You were actually shopping for baby formula.
I was at Costco and I was shopping for baby formula, as one does when one's sister and says, "Hey, my grandson might need some baby formula. Looks like your Costco has it. Can you get some?" So it turned out they were out too, but they had these beautiful, the Bartzella Ito peonies on this rack. And I'm like, oh my gosh, $32 each. So I ended up buying 2. I have no idea where I'm going to put them. While I'm standing there, this other lady comes up. She has knockout roses that look good that they'd knocked down to $10 a piece. No pun intended. So she's like, oh, maybe I should get these. And I said, get both. And her husband's standing there and he helped her get them. And then this other lady came and she got 2. And I'm like, I could stand here and sell them out in about 10 minutes if you give me a chance.
Yeah. I don't really like knockout roses anymore, but some people keep them really nice. My friend Teresa Dawkins up in Tulsa, her knockout roses look really good.
But for $10 a piece, you could put them in, and after a couple of years, you wouldn't feel really bad chucking them out if they got real yucky on you.
You can even put them for $10. You could put them in a pot, let them bloom on your deck or patio, and then yank them out in the fall.
Yeah.
Or it wouldn't be that big a deal. It's only $10.
Right.
That's cheap. You got one more piece of news you got to share.
Okay. So this is a reminder we said last week. And so this Saturday, May the 21st, I will be in Franklin, Indiana at the Wild Geese Bookshop from 1 to 2 p.m. answering gardening questions. And if you want to buy a book, I'll sign it. I looked at the forecast. Looks like a little bit of rain. So, the porch is big and covered. And if it gets really bad, we'll go inside. But you're not going to be out in the garden, people. If you live in the area, come see me.
That sounds like fun. I would love to visit that bookstore and see you if I lived anywhere close. So in my garden, the roses basically finished up while I was out of town. We went to Santa Fe.
Wait a minute. Roses are finished?
Well, the first bloom, it's time to cut them back and then, deadhead them. It's time.
Oh, you're way
I'm looking
ahead.
out outside my window. Yeah, they
Huh.
bloom. They always bloom right around Mother's Day. I mean, they still have some blooms. It's not like they aren't blooming at all, but you know. So I was out of town and I missed that we got rain in Oklahoma, but apparently we did. But it doesn't look like much in my garden. It's hot here too. So I didn't get anything done in the garden. I resisted going to nurseries while I was in Santa Fe because I have enough plants. And I just got to say one thing. I am great.
Wait. Do I need to call 911? Because you just said you have enough plants, which makes me think that you're not right in the head.
I have enough plants. I'm out of places to put the darn things. So, my big gratitude is that right now Oklahoma is not as dry as Santa Fe. That state has been on fire. So I thought I would never get enough water. I drank and drank and drank, but they were so dry that your mouth would just dry out. So as soon as we crossed the border into Texas, I could tell it wasn't so dry. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
So nothing is going on here other than the larkspur are starting to bloom. I am going to write a post today and visit with my grandbaby. You want to do the first quote?
Well, before we do that, I wanted to ask real quick. So are you getting ready to do any of the Chelsea chop in your garden?
Well, here's the weird thing. Yes, on some things I will do the Chelsea chop, but because that spring was so cold for so long, my stuff hasn't grown like it usually does. So I'm kind of watching it, and I may do mine a little bit later. But normally, yeah, I do my chop right now. But things are not growing that well.
My chop would be in 2 weeks around the time of the Indy 500. So I'll see how things are, but I may be a little bit delayed too.
Well, let's revisit this in a couple of weeks and decide what we're going to do. I am looking at this one aster right outside it's a native aster that grows really well here, or it may be bluebird. They both grow like this. I do need to chop that one back.
Okay. We will revisit it next week and the following week. Here is the quote. One of the best tricks a garden plays is that you never quite remember how it's going to be. That first day after winter has gone, when you go outside and can stay outside all day fiddling with jobs that aren't pressing enough to weigh heavily, but will nevertheless pay dividends. A garden is made up of 1,000 small inventions, but each small act is a defiance even, against a world without anchors or safe harbors. Anna Pavord. Is that how you say her last name?
I think so. I think that's how her name is pronounced. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody pronounce it, even though you and I have both read a lot of her books. I think she's one of the most beautiful garden writers, and that's so true. And I'm going to say this in my gardening commissions. I'm going to be fiddling with some of those jobs when I get done here.
I like the idea of going out and fiddling.
So our flower this week, I think was my idea, and you were like, oh, holy moly. Viburnums. How to pick one for your garden. And why were you, oh, holy moly?
Because there are a couple of hundred different viburnums that are available that you could grow in your garden. And that would be a long litany, and we shall not do that. We'll just talk about a couple.
We're going to talk about a couple that we both grow. And I thought this was really interesting what you found, the family they're in.
Well, they used to be in the honeysuckle family, which is Caprifoliaceae, which is what I had learned. And then the taxonomists, as they are wont to do, decided that that was not the family. And now they're in their own family called Adoxaceae, Adoxaceae. And there are like 5 genuses, I think, in that family. And the first genus that got moved over there was Adoxa. And so that's the whole family's named after Adoxa. Whatever that is. I've never heard of that either.
I don't even know what an adoxa is. All right. Well, that's interesting. I remember that it used to be part of the honeysuckle family. And once again, it's that DNA taxonomy thing again. So if you're going to put a viburnum in your yard, viburnums can get quite big. So you came up with some criteria, which I thought was great. I really do.
So you want to look at size, because the viburnums are shrubs. They range in size from, I'll say 4 feet to 10 feet and taller. I've had some that were 12 feet before I cut them out. Some of them have flowers that are scented, and some of them have flowers with no scent. They vary in bloom type, time, and shape. And so most of them are like clusters of little florets, I'll call them. And we probably should have looked up. It's a raceme or something like that. And they can bloom as early as April in my garden or mid-April.
Right.
And there's some beautiful ones blooming right now.
Yeah, I have several blooming right now, and I have several that have already bloomed. So
there are sterile varieties.
Right. So you probably well, in my garden, I'm about pollinators. So I do have 2 sterile varieties, but the rest of them are not.
And then, of course, you can get native viburnums and you can get non-native viburnums. And I would tell you, the ones with scent generally are not native. I am not sure that you get scent from native viburnums. I can't think of one that has scent.
I can't either. And I actually looked up a bunch of mine today to see. And you talked, I mean, the most popular one that has scent is Korean spice.
Yeah, Viburnum carlesii. And it's actually a smaller viburnum, and I have one in my back garden. And by smaller, mine's around 5 to 6 feet. So it's not like it's teeny tiny, but great scent. You will remember the scent.
Yeah, I'll remember the scent, and I remember it, but I killed it. So I'm not good with Korean spice, but I have 2 that are fragrant. One I bought last year is Cayuga, Cayuga, and it is a hybrid cross between Korean spice and viburnum times carcophalum, which is the fragrant snowball. So I have that one. And then this year I planted Mohawk again, which is viburnum times Burkwoodii. And Mohawk I killed once before. And that's the thing about viburnums. They all have particular conditions that they like. And if in my case, I put Mohawk in an area that was not well drained, and it turned up its little roots and died. So I'm trying a bigger version of Mohawk, and I bought it at Bob Scott. And one thing I was going to say about that Bob told me when I was there, when I bought Mohawk this time, he said, Dee, he said, I took cuttings of this year. And he said, it looks like a big plant, but it's really not a big plant. And it needs its root system really developed before you plant it. And I think that's what happened to my old Mohawk, which I did not buy from him. And he said, just keep it in the pot all summer and water it. And he goes, and then plant it out in the fall. And I said, okay. I said, I bought Cayuga. He said, they don't like to be transplanted very much. And I said, well, I bought Cayuga last year. And he goes, it's still alive. And I said, it is. And I said, you told me this last year, and I did the same thing. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and we're making viburnums seem a little bit fussy, and they're not quite as fussy as you might think.
They're not fussy. I do think that the native varieties especially aren't fussy. I've never lost a native ever.
I have, because I've had it in the wrong place and it got too big and I cut it out. But other than that.
Yeah. And then there's another really pretty non-native viburnum called Summer Snow. And they're held in flat clusters horizontally, which makes a tiered effect. They are beautiful.
Very pretty.
It's a pretty.
My neighbor has
plant.
one. Viburnum plicatum, Summer Snow. Very pretty. And it blooms now in Indiana. So this is mid-May.
Which is nice.
And very striking.
So let's talk a little bit about natives. So a nice native are the group that are arrowwood viburnums, and that's Viburnum dentatum. And they're large. And if you needed like a shrub border between you and your neighbor, they would be great for that. They'll grow in partial shade. They'll grow in full sun. The flowers are not very showy and they don't have any scent, but pollinators simply love them because they're small, and they love them. They'll be covered with honeybees or butterflies. I have blue muffin. It's in this class. And so I planted 2 male viburnums nearby. I think one's Chicago luster, but I'm just doing that off the top of my head. That might be Chicago. Right. Is that right? It's Chicago something. I planted one of those, and then I planted another one just to be sure, because I have several arrowhead viburnums, and I really want those blueberries.
And I don't think it's that you planted male ones. I don't think that they're dioecious, where there's male and female separate plants. I think you have to have different varieties. to cross-pollinate.
Oh, it might be that. You're right. It might not be a male pollinator. You're right.
No, it's just you need two different varieties. The same with things like pawpaws, honeyberries, many apple trees, many plants need two different varieties to cross-pollinate. And because you want your arrowwood viburnum to cross-pollinate because it has those darkish blueberries, and that's good bird food, natural bird food.
It's good for your birds, and it's also the whole reason you plant blue muffin. You're right. I've forgotten. That's exactly right. You need them in two different, they have to be, and it's a little complicated because they have to be from two separate species, subspecies, but they also have to be closely related. It's very, I think that part's a little complicated.
Yes. But if you got like the arrowwood viburnum is Viburnum dentatum, and if you went to the garden center and you bought Viburnum dentatum blue muffin and Viburnum dentatum Chicago luster, you would have the two varieties. If you put them in my suburban yard, they would be plenty close enough.
Yeah, they would be. They don't have to be right next to each other, although mine are. This blue muffin is big. It has grown to be 10 feet tall in my garden. I'm going to chop it back some this year, I think. And I also grow Viburnum rifidulum, and it's known as the rusty blackhaw or southern blackhaw. And I planted this species years ago, and it's 20 feet tall, and it's at the end of my garden. It also does sucker. So if you're going to plant a southern blackhaw, expect suckers. And you can dig those up and chop them away from the mother plant and go plant them somewhere else, and they do really well. And I actually give those to other people. And then I also have Viburnum prunifolium Mick Rouge, which is supposed to pollinate other viburnums.
I had one of those, and when I did my big redo of my garden about 12 years ago, Viburnum prunifolium didn't make the cut. Yeah. I uplimbed it so it had sort of a tree shape, and then I thought, there's better choices. It's out of here. So it's out of here.
And a few years ago, and I think I'm able to get away with so many viburnums because I have such a big garden. I say I garden an acre and a half, but the truth is it's expanded further with shrubs because, so I have All That Glitters and All That Glows, which were trial plants from Proven Winners years ago. And I think they've got a new one out called Glitters and Glows or something like that, but they're smaller arrowwood viburnums, and they've only gotten about 5 feet, and they've been out there, I don't know, years, and they've not gotten any bigger. Now they do cross pollinate. And so I do have berries.
And those would be good for a suburban garden because they get smaller. The thing is, people think about viburnums and they think it's going to be too big. But even in my garden, I like to have bigger shrubs like along the outsides of the back garden because that's where the birds hide in the wintertime. And, the benefit of having fruit that they can eat is also very good. So I would not shy away from viburnums, even on a suburban lot. You could find a place for the right ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. And the truth is, I also planted them at the edge of my garden to stop the deer because they take up so much space, and deer don't like to jump into a space where they can't see what they're doing. And so they're a good plant to keep the deer out of my main garden. And
do the deer eat them?
You know what? I haven't noticed that the deer eat them, but they might. But they're so darn big, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
matter. It does if they're little and they got eaten. But once they're big.
Yeah. And I tell you what, that one southern black hog gets big fast. It got big within 5 years. So a few years ago, when I lost a bunch of my roses to rose rosette disease, I wrote a whole post, which we're going to link to, called Native Shrubs to Replace Roses. And some of the viburnums are in there, along with some other native shrubs.
Very nice. And I wrote a post probably a decade ago about why you should plant big shrubs in your garden. I should go look at that. And if it's decent, because it might be just junk, I'll link to that. Don't be afraid of the big shrubs.
Don't, because you know what? Sometimes you need big shrubs.
Exactly. Who's afraid of the big bad shrub? I'm not.
I'm not either. So here's our next quote. Instant gardening is no more satisfying to the soul than 30-second snatches of Mozart. condensed novels, or fast food? Anna Pavard.
I thought that was hilarious because, people want instant. And I'm really, in my containers, I kind of eased back a little bit on the number of plants I put in each one. I thought this is the summer. I really want these plants to come into their glory. I already fertilized all the containers once. I just want to take it nice and easy and give things a chance. No instant here.
No, and if you're wanting to grow our vegetable of the week, which is really a fruit, a berry, it is not instant either.
No, and that is the elderberry, Sambucus canadensis.
It's the common elderberry.
I don't have one in my garden.
You don't?
I have way in the back corner, I have one of those ornamental elderberries.
Well, I have two. I have two of common elderberry, and I put them in after the first, I guess it was the first spring after we'd been to England for the first time. And because over in England, they have elderberry everywhere and they love elderberry cordial. And so I kind of did it as a nod to England, not realizing at the time that it's a really important plant in the United States. It's considered a pioneer species and they're not long lived. They live about 10 to 20 years, but they sucker. So I think you're going to have them a long time. They're down by my cut flowers and they're in between the cut flower beds. And it's taken a little bit to get them started because they were small. And I found the plants in Texas when I went down there to give a talk and I bought those and a dewberry. So
yeah, you're not going to find too many people with elderberry in their gardens. You'll find wild elderberry out in the woods and things like that, or on the edge of the woods, I should say. They like sun to part shade.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting that you did that as a nod to England and you're just like, oh, but this is an important native plant.
A very important native plant in the United States, which it's funny because in England, they have a lot of our native plants and they love them. And so we don't always appreciate them here. I'll say this about them. They are big, gangly shrubs, but when they flower in mid to late summer, it is beautiful. And that's what they make cordial out of. I have let mine go ahead and flower and just let the bees have them because I'm trying to get them going. They're still not that big, but eventually they're going to be big, gangly shrubs and I'll make my own cordial, which will be fun.
That'll be nice. I will probably never have elderberry. Like I said, I have to look up that ornamental elderberry thing I have out there. You talk more about this other stuff. We did find out that elderberry is in the same plant family as viburnums, that Adoxaceae.
Yeah, how odd. So bees and native pollinators love the flowers of elderberry, which is one reason it's an important plant. And also the birds love the fruits. And so if you want to use the fruits for to eat, it's really a battle to get them before the birds get them all. And then they have rock hard seeds in the middle because they're like drupes. And so they are, the seeds start to get really big and then you can't really use the fruit. But if you time it right, apparently it makes great pie. I've never had elderberry pie.
I have not ever had elderberry pie either. And I believe that the elderberry I have is actually Sambucus nigra and the variety is black lace.
That's
has
the one I have.
Almost purplish maroon foliage on it, which is
right. It's
pretty.
A really, really dark purple. And there was black lace, which is the prettier of the two black leaved elderberry shrubs that came out about the same time. I have black lace too. Here's what I'm going to say about it. It always freezes back here in early spring because we'll get a late freeze and it, comes out really fast. Its leaves come out. So it gets frozen back 2 or 3 times. It is really ugly in winter. I think it's an ugly shrub in winter, but the leaves are spectacular. And honestly, the blooms are pink and they're beautiful too.
And here's the thing. Mine is sort of hidden back behind a spruce. So unless you were to walk back behind the spruce, you'll see those gangly elderberries trying to make a go at it. And I sit there and I think, I probably should try to dig those out and put them someplace where they would be visible.
Well, I
just don't
mean,
know
yeah,
where that's
probably.
going to be. It's just, I think when they got planted back there, obviously the spruce was not nearly as big as it is now, because that spruce
Right.
has really grown a lot. And I was just like, huh. So I would say if you have a big garden, elderberry is a plant you might want to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a small suburban lot like I do, you might think about it because, like Dee said, it's ugly in the wintertime.
It is. But you know what? I bought a golden one this year when I was out at Bob Scott's, because the leaves are so spectacular that I'm willing to put up with some of its issues. So
Dee, going back to the previous conversation where you don't have any more room for plants, where are you planting that gold leaf?
that's a good question. I have no idea where I'm going to plant it. It's still in its pot. I told you last week I've got a problem with these plants, but you don't find the golden ones anywhere. And it's got the same lacy foliage that the black lace has. And I just decided I wanted it, and I'll find a place for it, but probably not in the front of the border. It gets too big, and it also looks ugly in winter. So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one, but I'm not giving up my black lace. I mean, I love that plant.
Yeah, it's lovely. We have not really convinced everybody to run out and plant elderberry. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to provide a link to the Minnesota Wildflower site, and they've got some more information, and people should read about it. You will fall in love with the black lace variety if you see it at a garden center and think that would be a great accent plant. So just kind of read the label to see the upside and the downside of it.
Oh,
that's all we're going to.
And also, don't plant any of those elderberry cultivars in any kind of good soil. They like crummy, well-drained soil because that's what they live with. Oh, you know what? I wrote in here in our notes exactly where I'm going to put that golden elderberry.
But you had forgotten.
I'd forgotten. I'm going to put it on the back side of the she shed, the green she shed. That'll be really pretty, and I'll see it when I'm driving by, and I'll like it. So there you go. But it's not in the front of everything.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad to know. You'll have to put a picture on Instagram once you've got it planted to show how it looks against the green.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty. All right. So you have a quote.
I do. No garden can have too many bulbs. Splurge. It is the only way. Anna Pavord. Because we put on our bookshelf this week, we decided we were just going to talk about all the books by Anna Pavord, who, as you said, has led a very interesting life. She grew up without television, so she was a big reader. And she and her husband started off married life on a barge on, I don't know where you've got it in the notes.
It was on the River Thames. Which is not unusual for people in England. A lot of them live on those
and
houseboats.
They gardened.
And so
on the house.
Oh yeah, they gardened on those houseboats up on the top level. Yeah.
But then she realized that if she was going to garden, they would actually have to buy a property. So they bought an old rundown property, someplace called the Old Rectory in, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce that English word.
I have no idea what it is. It looks like Punk Knoll, but I don't know if that's right or not, but it's in West Dorset.
And she had an acre and a half. And so she has since moved from that, but I mean, she loved that garden for many, 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 many years.
Yeah. And I think our next quote talks about that garden and what it meant to her. So you're reading The Curious Gardener, which I also borrowed from the library, but then I bought another book. So tell us about The Curious Gardener.
The Curious Gardener is collections of essays, and she also wrote for The Independent and maybe some other British publication regularly.
I think she wrote for The Observer.
The Observer, too. I mean, she was writing every weekly columns and things. So there's a lot of great essays in there. And then it's kind of by months of the year. And at the end of each section, they talk about what to do that month. And I kind of breeze by that because it's very English centric, obviously, because she's a writer. Yeah. But I laugh because I think, is the entire England proper all do things at the exact same time? Because it's
it seems like it, but it can't be, because I've been to it 3 times and I've been to totally different areas. And not only can they not do everything at the same time, but also they have very different conditions. Like if you're in East Anglia, those conditions are very different from Yorkshire, because East Anglia is on the eastern side of the country. I don't know. I mean, the lake area, the beautiful lakes, those are way up north,
Right.
which is getting close to Scotland. So obviously they can't do everything all at the same time. But I guess they just do like we do here and go, oh, somebody wrote that for the East Coast, right? And so we go, well, that doesn't really apply to Oklahoma.
Right. Well, Monty Don on Gardener's World, he always has jobs for the weekend, as they call it, the weekend. And, it just got me thinking that they're all like in unison there, but I know they can't be. So anyway, it's a charming book. I pulled out a ton of quotes. Some of the quotes I pulled out are from that book for this week's podcast. And I'll talk more in our rabbit hole. Tell us about, you're reading a new book called The Seasonal Gardener, Creative Plant Combination.
Yeah, right. And that's actually, they went and redid one of her old books, and then this one just came out. And so it's like all the things she learned about it, and they rewrote it basically. And it's really, really good. And it's fun to see the plant combinations. And I like that it's written according to the seasons, which, spring, summer, winter, fall, winter. And, but some of those combinations won't work in our hotter gardens. Primroses come to mind, for example, but she talks about hellebores. She talks about, aconites, winter aconites, like things like that. And so that was really cool. And she has some good ideas about things that do better and how much you should plant and how swaths of things look better than things of one. So I've also read the bulb. I've also read bulb, and I've read the tulip.
Yeah, and I was looking at YouTube videos, and I hope I don't get this completely wrong, but I think it was the book Bulb. She said it should be like opening a jewel box, and every page should jump out a picture and say, I must have that. That was her intention in writing that particular book, which I have. Anyway, so those are the two books by Anna Pavord that we put on the bookshelf. The Curious Gardener, which I'm reading. I had a library copy on my Kindle and actually bought the physical book. And then The Seasonal Gardener, Creative Plant Combinations, which you are reading the physical book.
Yes, I'm reading the physical. I bought it. Because you couldn't get it from the library yet. And then I also got The Curious Gardener from the library, which I suspect I'm going to buy. I just love her writing. It's really artful.
It is.
So our next quote: this place, which I loved with a passion, taught me everything else I learned about gardening, though actually the more you go on, the less you realize you know, and the more extraordinary the whole process seems. Anna Pavord. I am so glad you let me do that quote, Carol.
I thought that quote was you.
Oh, thank you. That is a real compliment. It really is, because that's exactly how I feel about my land. The longer I garden, the less I know, and the more magical and really miraculous it all seems.
Indeed. And I was at the greenhouse yesterday. Big surprise. People think, does she go there every day? It's like, no, I don't go there every day.
It's right down the street.
Well, it's amazing the number of younger people. Either I'm getting just to be an old lady, but the younger people that are going and they're buying plants. And there was a woman there with two little boys, like 3-4-year-olds, picking out plants. And, he says, I'm going to have my own garden this year. And I'm like, it's going to be fabulous. So I just, I didn't want to tell those young people, well, you think you know plants now? You just wait 30 years and you'll figure out you didn't know nothing back. You
don't. You sure don't. And not only that, you will know something, but every year is different. The weather's different. The rainfall's different.
Exactly.
The soil is slightly different, even if you, I spend a lot of time with garden coaching clients talking about soil, and people see my soil and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so crumbly and black and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's 33 years of compost.
Yeah. It takes a while. It takes a while.
So we're going to talk a little bit about our dirt, which, we kind of found fascinating.
Yeah, I guess it's a meme going around, especially in Great Britain, but it's called No Mow May, trying to convince people not to mow their lawn in May. And I'm like, Dee, I'm never not doing that. that's a good way to lose your lawn completely.
It's a good way to have a whole bunch of weeds in your lawn. Like I have weeds in my lawn anyway, because I don't do, weed and feed at all. So I have weeds, but I keep them under control because I mow them, and I don't have a huge lawn. I mean, I have some pasture grass, but anyway, we both say no.
Yeah. One of my neighbors 2 doors down, he has a mowing service, and we had some thunderstorms that came through on like the day they would have come to mow his yard. So he kind of got skipped for almost a week and a half. And his lawn looked like, if we didn't know that he had a service that was just behind, the board would have had to send a letter that says, why aren't you mowing your lawn? It was seeding all over the place. And then it's murderous to cut. It's a mess. So no mow May is no for Carol.
Yeah, it's no for D too. It's also no for Erin of the Impatient Gardener, who, brought this to our attention because she talked about it on Instagram and maybe on her blog. I will say this, I'm all in favor of less lawn, more garden, because the lawn is a monoculture. However, if you're trying to bring back wildflowers or rewilding your lawn, which is why this got started in Great Britain, this is not the way to do it. Not at all. Creating a meadow is a lot harder than just not mowing, and you're going to end up with weeds, including here, southern sandburrs, which we also call cockleburrs commonly, and they hurt your feet, and you don't want any more of those. And the only way you can keep those under control is to mow pretty low. So that's our PSA for the week.
Yeah. Now we think this originated in Great Britain, where they are trying to bring back more natural wild areas. They've just kind of lost too much. And so it may make sense in some of those places. It may make sense way out in the boonies, not like where you're at, but if you have a field or something, does not make sense for suburban lawns, in my opinion.
Well, here's the thing. Even my meadow that is in the upper pasture, I mow it down in the beginning of the year. And right now it's just full of coreopsis, because that's what's blooming up there. And I also mow paths through it so I can walk up there. And I also reseed it every fall with more wildflowers, because I'm trying to reduce the amount of grass. So it's a balance thing, and it's not the easiest thing to do. And just not mowing is just going to give you a bunch of dandelions and a bunch of ugly stuff.
All right. Well, I'm going to read the next quote. The real point of a garden is to increase the value of our lives. It gives us the best chance we have of fitting ourselves back into a world that cities make us forget. A garden locks you into the slow, inevitable rolling out of the seasons, cycles of growth and decay, the lengthening of days, and shortening of shadows. Anna Pavord.
I love that. And it's true.
And that was my rabbit hole this week, was reading more about her and looking at some of those YouTube videos. And, I don't know, we talked about this before, like when you're a kid and summer vacation starts and you join the library reading program, and, you and I probably knocked it out. What they thought would take a kid all summer to read, we'd knock out in the first week. But I thought, well, maybe I'll read all of Anna Pavord's books this summer. The Bulb,
right?
The Naming of Names, The Tulip, The Curious Gardener, the one you bought, but maybe not. But anyway, that was my rabbit hole. No lost lady of garden writing today.
No, she's very, very popular, and thank goodness she is. And thank goodness the Tulip became extremely popular in the United States, because now people are going and looking at her other writings, which are just lovely. And if you don't want to read everything, go listen to one of her talks on YouTube. She's really good.
Yes. So your rabbit hole.
My rabbit hole is that I am so in love with everything chili pepper. I really am. I've been in love with everything chili pepper for several years, but now I'm on a quest, because a few years ago, I decided I was going to learn how to do New Mexican cooking, because I loved green chilies so much. And I already cook a lot of dishes from there, but I really want to become better at it. And I really want to become good at carne adobado, which is an actual New Mexican. They're the only ones who make this dish. And it's basically pork that is baked with red chili. So I bought some red chili while I was in New Mexico, as one does. And we went to Chimayo, and we went to Rancho de Chimayo, A little bit more about that in a minute, but there was a lady selling chili on the side of the road on the way to the little church of the Holy Dirt, which is why Chimayo became famous in the first place.
Uh-huh.
And I stopped there, and she had a plethora of just items. Like she had beans, which I bought some beans from a Mexican market while I was there. And then on top of that, she had something called Chicos. Have you ever heard of Chicos?
I have not.
So Chicos are small dried corn kernels. Pozole is hominy. Okay, so that's corn kernels that have been treated with lye. Chicos are little dried corn kernels, and it was a way for them to, they could only harvest and they didn't have refrigeration. So this was one way they dried chili and they dried this other stuff. So Chicos, I said, what do you do with these? And she goes, well, I put them in my beans. And I was like, oh, as a thickener. That makes sense. Then I saw in the Rancho de Chimayo cookbook, which I read on the way home, that they actually cook them as a side dish. So I'm going to try it this fall. But one interesting thing that this lady on the side of the road, she had red chili in mild and hot, which is not uncommon. And and Chimayo chili is considered one of the best because they're a particular variety grown in their soil. Okay.
Right.
They're a small variety and they have a very thin skin, and they're not good for green chili, but they're really good for the winter red chili. And so she had some of that. And then she had this other chili that was a lighter color, and it was kind of an orange instead of the red. And I said, what's that? And she goes, oh, that's sun-dried. And so I bought a packet of it too. So basically I went down the giant chili pepper rabbit hole. And last year I did grow Chimayo chilies because when I was there, I went to a nursery and bought them. And of course, you can't really call them Chimayo chilies because they have to be, it's terroir again,
right,
where it has to be grown in that valley. But I got the exact same size chilies, and they do make a good dried chili. I just used it all up. So while I was doing some searching, I also bought a book, Used, Red or Green New Mexico Cuisine, because when you're in a New Mexican restaurant, they always say, do you want it red or green? Or you can say, I want it Christmas. And then Christmas means you get green chili sauce and red chili sauce next to each other. Very nice. So that was my giant rabbit hole, which I'm still down, and I'm having such a good time at it. I'll let you know how the sun-dried chili tastes.
Yeah, and we shouldn't have these conversations right before lunch like this.
I'm so hungry, Carol. I'm starving.
So tell us what you're going to do in your garden this next week.
I'm going to deadhead the roses and squish the rose sawfly larvae, which are driving me nuts. I may even, if it stays under 90, I may actually hit those leaves with a little bit of neem oil. You just don't want to be above 90 degrees. And it'll smother them. That's how it works. And then I'm also going to tie up my tomatoes as soon as I eat some lunch. I'm going to run outside and tie up to my tomatoes. And I'm going to harvest my lettuce, because if it gets much hotter, my lettuce is either going to turn bitter or bolt. That's what I'm going to do. What are you going to do?
Well, I've been picking lettuce every morning. And so last week it got really hot, but this week it's, more seasonable, temperatures in the 70s during the day, except I think Friday goes to 88. But anyway, like I said, I have peppers and tomatoes in the garden, but I haven't sown any seeds for like beans or corn or squash or cucumbers. And squash and cucumbers really like warm soil, so I'm not in a big rush, but I'll start working on getting seeds going in the garden. I got a lot of weeds to clear out, though, in a couple of those beds, and then tulips to deadhead. And, it's just starting to move from that panic of planting to, fiddling around, as Anna Pavord would say, doing a little this and a little that. And so that is what is on tap for the week. Yes.
Maintenance, pulling weeds, cutting things back, deadhead. That's what we're moving into.
And mowing. I'll probably mow again today.
I'm mowing.
I mow every 3 or 4 days. And that's a wrap. We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us. Also, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything.
And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites. If you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Goodbye, everybody. Happy gardening.